Good afternoon, all of you. It is needless to say that forests are a treasure trove of biodiversity, and there are lots of tangible and intangible benefits that we accrue out of it. There are lots of direct and indirect consumptive as well as non-consumptive use values that are available from this complex system. So in this talk, we will be discussing on three basic heads. We will first see a historical background as to how we have looked upon historically at forest germplasm, and then I will be moving on to three small stories on how contemporarily, in the second part of the presentation, we will try and see how in the contemporary situation we look at forest germplasm, and we will conclude with the following future directions or a rationale of how the forest genetic resources will be looked upon by humankind, or what are its possibilities. So since the advent of humankind, we have always been given everything that we require by the forests, whether it is the fruits that were collected or the small pigs that were hunted by the hunter-gatherer tribes, or the early humans as we call them, or the different crops and cattle and other poultry which were domesticated by the settled agriculturists around 10,000 BC. So we have always been dependent on forests for life. The Egyptian civilization has recorded evidences in its 3D sculptures called bas relief in the palace of Nimrod near Tigris River, which is in the present day Iraq. Around 500 BC, they have records where a wind god or a priest is having a pot of sacred dust that is being sprayed upon on a date palm. So according to our present day knowledge, we know that this is artificial hybridization of the date palm that person was doing. So India is not bad in this. We have always been pioneers in all fields of study. To quote one example, Kautilya's Arthashastra, Kautilya, the minister of Chandragupta Maurya, he has written documents of sandalwood trees being identified based on aroma and color. And he also notes in his manuscript that the finest sandal comes from Kishnita, which is present day Bellary in Karnataka. So this is not a small feat. This is actually identification of different genotypes or different individuals which have superior characteristics within the sandal species. So it means that people of that time also had knowledge of genetic diversity, although it is only in recent times after the CBD has formed that genetic diversity has been given more importance and priority. Most voyagers had a very keen eye on diversity, and most voyagers voyaged and explored the entire world actually to document this diversity. Most voyagers, including Darwin, they have written meticulously about the variations that they have found at different regions of the world, and they have also brought samples of those to their countries of origin. For example, there have been voyagers who went to South America and they have brought cinchona. Cinchona is a plant which is used to treat malaria in those regions, but they tried to grow that in the UK and Portugal, but with no success, because cinchona requires the climatic conditions and the soil that is available only in southern part of America. So India also had a lot of people who came to India for the bounty of natural resources that we have, which were not just in the name of jewels and diamonds. We also had natural resources in our biodiversity. For example, India has been prized world over for the availability of huge trees of teak, which is considered as the paragon of Indian timbers. It is considered as the best timber for a carpenter to carve anything because of its exquisite golden yellow color. It has a premium quality even now, and it fetches premium prices. But during those times, people did not know of its actual value that would happen several years after they utilized the trees that were there in plenty. So they cut down lots of trees for building ships known as urus. And the British East India Company, they transported most of the produce from India to the Great Britain by using these urus. And just giving one more example of produce which was under the keen eye of the British Empire was black pepper and other spices like cardamom in India. So the Indian forests were in fact looted by the Britain for black pepper, but they, again, as in the case of Cinchona, they also tried to grow black pepper in their native land. Again, you cannot get the rains of the Western Ghats and the black soil of the Western Ghats in Great Britain, so they were not able to succeed in that. When we talk about the worth of the germplasm, if you compare it with industries like petroleum and software and hardware industries, petroleum with an annual market of around 500 billion US dollars, and software and hardware industries both combined with a total annual market share of 800 billion US dollars, our plant genetic resources have somewhere around 500 to 800 billion US dollars that are because of direct uses of plant genetic resources. This is not my data, it is from the status of the world's plant genetic resources 2014. So the importance of plant genetic resources should be very clear with this single graph. I hope that drives my point very clearly into each of your minds. And this, I would like to add on that this value of the plant genetic resources does not include the ecosystem services which are difficult to evaluate and have not been evaluated for this data collection. Now coming to the first of the three stories that I said I will be talking about, the story of Aryapacha. It is a species of Trichopus zeylanicus subspecies Travancoricus found in the southern part of Western Ghats, and it is called Varahi in Sanskrit. It is a very inconspicuous plant which just looks like any other plant in the forest. And it was this gentleman who can be credited to putting a value to this plant, because this Dr. P. Pushpangadan, former director of Jawaharlal Nehru Tropical Botanical Garden and Research Institute, Parvati, Thiruvananthapuram, he was going on a trek to Agastyamalai Hills, trying to climb the peak Agasthyarkulam, which is a 22-kilometer trek which needs to be covered in a day because there are no base camps anywhere along the way. So what they were guided by people from the Kani tribe who are native NTFP collectors, NTFP meaning non-timber forest produce. So they were seeing with lot of awe that these Kani tribe people, the guides who were there with them, were not getting tired even after climbing. So upon constant inquiry, the Dr. Pushpangadan and his colleagues found out that these Kani tribes were chewing on a bit of leaf that is being collected from the forest here and there. So they asked and they tried to find out the pharmacological importance of this, and they did a swim test in mice, and a control mouse, which is a mouse fed with normal food, and mice was given injection of amphetamine, which is a steroid which increases strength, and the third mouse was given macerated fruits of Aralipacha. So it was seen that the control mouse was able to swim only for 3 hours, whereas the mouse which was given the steroid injection was able to swim for 6 hours continuously, whereas the ones which were given the fruits of Aralipacha swam for 18 hours. So this means that this particular plant and its products have anti-fatigue properties, and due to its non-steroidal nature, the JNTVGRI in fact coordinated with the Ayurveda pharmacy of Coimbatore, and they came up with this product called Jeevani. In the morning session, Sir Narasimha Reddy sir was telling about the access and benefit sharing model. This is the story which led to the formulation of the access and benefit sharing model. India gave the access and benefit sharing model to the world. And this forms the basis of the Nagoya Protocol 2010. And here the importance is that because the Kami tribes were the providers of the indigenous traditional knowledge, they were given some benefit out of it, whatever profits that came out of the selling of Jeevani. And because the researchers were part of identification of this, they also got some part of the profit share, and the company obviously obtained the remaining part of the profits. This is the world's first instance where part of a biological resource was accessed and indigenous traditional knowledge was used to create a commercial product for the benefit of the society as a whole, and there was also some benefit to the indigenous people. Afterwards, people have tried to cultivate this particular plant in the outside the forest, in the field conditions, agricultural field conditions, but again with no success, because the plants which were grown in the forest had that property of energizing the people, but once it is brought under cultivation, it did not have the same properties, which means, or which brings us to the importance of saving plants as well as other organisms in situ. Now coming to the second story, this is a fabled example from the United States of America, the species recovery of American chestnut. So basically chestnuts belong to two different species, the American chestnut and Chinese chestnut. American chestnut is a tree which is very economically important in America. It has a clean, straight and cylindrical stem which makes it much more economical to sell the timber, whereas the Chinese chestnut is a branched, short stature tree with not much of economical use. The American chestnut is used for timber, and also the nuts are used for cookie production. However, right now the American chestnut is critically endangered as per IUCN due to its decreased population, which was around more than 1 million in the USA. It has come down to a few hundred individuals in 2010. So during that time, what happened was that the only parakeet, or the parrot which is endemic or present in the mid-Atlantic USA, which is called the Carolina parakeet, it got extinct at that place. And there are also other species of moths which got extinct. Now the cause of the reduction of populations of American chestnut was directly not humans. It was a pathogen known as the chestnut blight pathogen, which forms canker on the tree barks. The bark is a part of the plant which conducts food materials. The flowing bundles are actually affected, leading to the death of the plant. So what scientists did was they found out that Chinese chestnut does not have the susceptibility to this pathogen. So they did breeding experiments. They tried making crosses between the Chinese and American chestnut so that the characteristics of the American chestnut are maintained, whereas the resistant characteristics of Chinese chestnut is imparted to this hybrid. So due to this hybridization experiments, people were able to actually revive that species, but in the present day context, people are doing a simpler protocol because this requires 7 generations of breeding and hybridization, which takes around 50 to 60 years to complete. But in the present times, with the advent of new age biotechnology, there has been a discovery that the oxalate oxidase gene from bread wheat can be taken, because that confers that resistance characteristic to this plant. So that has been introduced into the chestnut. Different methods of introduction are there: gene gun, agrobacterium mediated gene transfer, and you can see the results. The American chestnut dies off because of this chestnut blight. The Chinese chestnut survives because it is innately resistant to this particular blight, whereas the American chestnut hybrid is also resistant. It has characteristics of American chestnut, but with the resistance characteristic of Chinese chestnut. Now coming to the third and last story, which is also which happens to be one of my very closest stories, because my entirety of my research was on plant sources of camptothecin. So camptothecin is a $1 billion anti-cancer drug which has properties of curing ovarian cancer, breast cancer, colorectal cancer and lung cancer, and it has 2 commercial formulations, topotecan and irinotecan. Camptothecin was actually monopolized by the Chinese market, the China has the Camptotheca acuminata as a tree, which provides this plant source of anti-cancer drug. But Indian scientists also discovered one particular species, which is Nothapoditis pneumoniana, also known as the Mapia foetida, which is also a source of this species, this chemical. However, due to unsustainable bark harvesting of the species, the populations have declined at the rate of 20% in 20 years' time. As the populations were declining, scientists had met and they decided to go for alternative sources of this particular drug, and they identified several other species. Around 13 species were identified. I was fortunate enough to work on one of them, which is Pyromacantha viridis, which has been dubbed as the highest ever camptothecin producing plant in the world. It produces around 1.35% of camptothecin in its fruits. So what we did was, we tried to find out how much is the genetic diversity, where are the populations of the plant that are there in the wild. So we did extensive field studies in the southern part of India, and we tried to find out how much genetic diversity is there in the plant. And we found out that there is quite a good level of genetic diversity within the species, and whichever individuals which were having a higher production of camptothecin in its plant material, they were mass multiplied and given to the farmers to grow. So right now in rubber plantations, under the huge shade of rubber trees, people are growing this plant so that they get an additional revenue from rubber, because rubber is not a very successful business right now. This is helping them survive. So coming to the concluding remarks, how or what are the future directions that will be there for germplasm conservation? The first thing is that we are going to experience climate extremities. We are going to see extremely high temperatures and drought conditions and extremely heavy rainfall events, which brings us to the need of having different plants of the same species having different characteristics. That is, the same plant should be able to grow in dry conditions and in wet conditions. So due to research, people have found out that there are dryland varieties, there are also varieties which can grow in extremely submerged conditions. One example of that is the Swarna variety. There are also lots of studies by Indian Institute of Rice Research, but the origin of all this is the forest. The origin of all these varieties will be the wild rice varieties which are there in cultivation, or not, some of the varieties which are not even in cultivation. There is also another variety called the Kakka variety of the North Canada, Karnataka, which is salt tolerant. Because of the rising sea levels, it is expected that salt water will be intruding into the inland areas. So the importance of salt tolerant varieties also is important. This is just for a single crop that I am telling. It is applicable for every single plant or every single crop that is there. Then, with the reconstruction being possible with the advent of eDNA and CRISPR technology, it is possible to reconstruct the natural history of the past. It is becoming increasingly possible. Whether it is ethically correct or not is something that can be debated, but it is a possibility. And facing new age problems require new age solutions, and there are solutions for every of our problem in the wild. Only thing we have not understood or identified those solutions. For example, obesity is one big issue that people are facing now. Cholesterol is another issue, VIP disease that people are getting very frequently in the present days. So there is one plant called the Garcinia indica. In parts of Maharashtra and Karnataka, people drink this juice called kokum juice, which has a particular chemical called hydroxycitric acid, which actually confers this cholesterol dissolving property, leading to thinning property. So it is an anti-slimming agent which is right now available in commercial formulations, which is again sourced from forests. Now, we can conserve forests in the form of ex situ conservation, in situ conservation. We can conserve individual species in botanical gardens, but that is not it. We have to conserve the landscape, and whatever landscape that has been untouched has to be kept as such. Because we have sacred groves, they may be called by different names in different parts of the world. Log Cantons in Meghalaya, Ayyappankavu in Kerala. Doesn't matter what name you call them by, but you have to conserve them to protect the remaining relict species and genetic diversity that is there in the wild. So with that small note, I thank you all for patient listening.